Hello, it's Coach Blades again, and today we'll be covering Chapter 12, Romanesque Europe. Some key ideas from this chapter include a revitalization of large-scale architecture and sculpture. Pilgrimages become very popular and are a way to work off sins. So all across Europe, people are moving and coming to famous churches to see relics and receive miracles. Most notably, the pilgrimages changed the architecture to account for all the large influxes of people now visiting these churches. We will continue to see manuscript painting, and we'll also look at some fiber arts. We have 3 required works for this chapter, although the first one, the Church of St. Foy, also includes a reliquary and the Last Judgment tympanum at the entrance to the church. We'll also look at a manuscript of Hildegard von Bingen's Vision and the Bayeux Tapestry. You will notice a lot of the vocabulary for this chapter includes some words you've seen before relating to architecture. Because the churches changed their design to accommodate pilgrims, a lot of these words do relate to architecture. On to our first required work, the Church of St. Foy in Conques, France. Let's begin with the form and layout of the church. The first thing you'll notice in the picture on the right is the barrel vaulting at the very tall ceiling. This allowed for better acoustics, it made the church more fireproof to not have a timber roof anymore, and it added to the mysterious nature of how churches were built. The layout is a cruciform shape or longitudinal or axial plan that is in the shape of a Latin cross, with the nave being longer than the transept that runs perpendicular to it. Along the transept and the apse, we have added radiating chapels along an ambulatory. This allowed pilgrims to enter from the transept, go around to each tiny chapel to see the relics that were on display, and then exit through the other end of the transept. All of this meant that the services going on in the central part of the church were not disturbed. Pilgrims came to this church on their way to Santiago de Compostela, a famous pilgrimage site in northern Spain. This would have been one of many stops from pilgrims visiting from far away. So the function of churches like this one were to host pilgrims on their journey, to bless its visitors as they demonstrate their piety, to help them be saved on Judgment Day, which we will look at in the tympanum, and also to inspire or kind of scare Christians into behaving in a holy manner. Now we will look at the reliquary of the Church of St. Foy. This would have been the most famous relic in the church and would have been in one of the radiating chapels, the prime thing that the pilgrims were coming to visit and see. The statue is only 33 inches tall and is a portrait of a seated female martyr, St. Foy. We'll talk more about her in a second. You'll notice she has a large head, almost disproportionate to the size of her body, and this was because it was repurposed from an ancient Roman statue of a child. Inside the container are the actual remains of St. Foy. You'll notice that the outside is covered in gold and silver and lots of jewels. Many of these precious stones would have been donated by pilgrims as a way to show their piety. Originally, this reliquary was located at a nearby church, but the monks at Conques stole it and justified it because St. Foy apparently wanted to move. The reliquary brought in numbers of pilgrims and brought in money along with them, which helped the town prosper and the church bring glory to God. A little background history about St. Foy, who was southern France's favorite martyr. She was killed at age 12 for refusing to worship pagan gods. Diocletian put her to death in 303 CE, and she became a martyr and later a saint for her cause. It is believed by pilgrims that she can cure blindness and help free one from captivity, so this reliquary is very powerful in the eyes of a Christian pilgrim. St. Foy in particular is meant to inspire veneration and an increased faith in Christianity with any pilgrim who views her. After all, someone so young died for this cause. It is meant to inspire the viewer. Now let's look at the exterior of the Church of St. Foy, and in particular, the tympanum on the south portal. This is a Last Judgment scene, which means that Christ sits in the center, ready to judge the viewer to either go to heaven or to hell. Christ is the largest figure in the middle, He sits on a throne. He has a ring of space surrounding him, almost like a full-body halo. His wounds are showing, and angels hold a cross behind him. His right hand points upward to the saved, and his left hand gestures down to the damned. These are meant to serve as a reminder to those entering about heaven and hell. One would enter the church on the right side or Christ's left, as a sinner would go through the church services and exit out the other door on the saved side. When we are looking at it on our left, we see visions of paradise. We see Jerusalem displayed, known from the architectural clues. We see Abraham holding his 2 children. Above him, the hand of God beckons a kneeling Saint Foy. There are virgins, martyrs, prophets, apostles, angels, and everything is very orderly, which creates a sense of serenity. On the viewer's right side, we see quite the opposite. There's a spiky-haired devil with a club. It's very disorderly and chaotic. The devil bites off the crown of a king in the upper portion. Each sin is represented. For example, gluttons are hung by their feet. There's a reference to Judas, who was responsible for betraying Christ. There's adultery, a miser hung by his purse, slander being represented by a tongue being ripped out, a poacher roasted by a rabbit on a spit, somebody's eating brains, there's lots of weapons. Obviously, this is not the side you want to be on. In the middle, underneath the Christ image, are rows of angels opening graves of the dead. This represents that souls are going to go up to be weighed, and they are greeted by the archangel Saint Michael, who confronts and mocks the devil. At the very top, there is an inscription that says, "O sinner, change your morals, for you might face a cruel judgment." This tympanum serves a primary function to inspire, or like I said before, kind of scare Christians into behaving in a holy manner that would ultimately lead them to heaven. This was a reminder not just to pilgrims, but people of the town and the monks and clergymen who occupied the church. Now we will look at Hildegard von Bingen's vision, a manuscript that only exists in copy. Hildegard was a nun known for her visions with God. She even oversaw the publication of a book of her visions and talks with God. This image shows, as best as possible, how it felt for her to receive these visions from God. She described them as fiery visions. She sits in a church building as designated by the architecture, and from up above, these kind of tentacle-looking things come down and touch her eyes. She sits in a position we are familiar with from previous manuscripts, in the author portrait position, sitting down with her feet on a stool. Her scribe sits by, his name was Volmer, and waits by her side with a book to record what she says. Again, similarly to in style that we've seen before, there are heavy black outlines to define the forms, and there's excessive drapery folds that indicate legs and arms but give little indication of other bodily forms. Last, we have the Bayeux tapestry, a fiber art fabric that is over 230 feet long. I'm showing you one scene here, but I suggest you look at the link in the PDF that goes along with this presentation to see every scene spelled out and labeled. It's called a tapestry, but it's actually not. A tapestry involves weaving fabric and the colors and forms are built into it. This is actually an embroidery where there's a solid color linen background and thread creates the colors and forms by sewing it into the flat fabric. The scenes all surround the 1066 Battle of Hastings, and we see everything from the first meals, cavalry scenes, fighting scenes, loading up the ships, crowning the new king, everything imaginable that went into the war, not just the battle scenes itself, are featured. In the end, William the Conqueror, or the Duke of Normandy, won and became the first Norman king of England. This work was completed just a few years later in 1070. It's believed that the patron was Odo, or the Bishop of Bayeux, who was also William's half-brother. The tapestry definitely shows Normans in a positive way in all of these events, even the bloody ones. So the function of this piece is to commemorate the win of the Normans and also to give a semi-accurate depiction of the war. Embroidery lends itself to kind of unrealistic figures. They're very flat, they don't have any depth or space perception, and only 8 colors are used. It's split into 3 sections with 2 narrower bands of registers at the top and bottom, and 1 larger band in the middle that shows all the scenes with people. The upper and lower registers are filled with fanciful beasts. The middle section is a continuous narrative with figures repeating. We've seen this before in medieval art, such as in the Vienna Genesis. In this scene, we have a cavalry attack, which means soldiers are on horseback, which was one of the most common forms of attack. It's easy to see that the colors used are not natural. The horse on the left features blue, red, and tan, all in the same body. We get a glimpse into what soldiers really would have worn, with conical steel helmets, protective nose plates, chainmail shirts, and shields and spears. The mortally wounded men and horses lay along the tapestry's mid and bottom. At the top of the central register, we see Latin inscriptions or tituli, which let the viewer know what's going on. Scholars are still unsure about how it was displayed, again, over 230 feet long, 75 scenes, and over 600 people featured. It was quite the feat to just produce this masterpiece.